The Lions of Little Rock, Chapter 13, Not the Stomach Flu. The next day was Monday, the big day, the day of our presentation. I thought I'd be nervous, but I wasn't. I was excited. No more waiting. I was actually going to do it. I was going to talk in class. JT was waiting for me by the picnic table when Daddy dropped me off. Big day, he said. Yep, I agreed as I handed him his homework, which had 4 problems wrong, nicely scattered throughout the assignment. Last week, Liz told everyone you were going to talk, JT said. That true? Yep, I said. My voice didn't even wobble. I felt for the feather in my pocket. The magic was still there. I was ready. I could talk in front of 1,000 people. Well, maybe not 1,000, but 30 in my history class definitely seemed doable. Liz wasn't at school when the bell rang. The bus was sometimes late, so I didn't worry. Not until homeroom was almost over and Miss Taylor cleared her throat and said, Marley, would you step into the hall for me for a moment? The class froze. I stood and slowly made my way toward the door, everyone watching me. A month ago, I would have fainted dead away, but now I felt eerily calm. The feather was still in my pocket. Liz would be here any minute. What could go wrong? Miss Taylor didn't say another word until we were in the hallway. Marley, I'm afraid I have to tell you that Elizabeth will not be returning to Westside Junior High. I stared at her. I heard words, and I knew what they meant, but they didn't make any sense. Why would Liz leave Westside? Liz is very ill, and Miss Taylor paused. I'm sorry. I will give you a few days to write down your report and turn it in. She turned and walked back to the classroom, leaving me in the hall. The bell rang, and students swarmed around me, but I didn't move. I was a balloon that had been blown into a cactus. One pop, and all my confidence was gone. I couldn't concentrate in math. Mr. Harding called on me twice, and I didn't even answer. At lunch, JT and Sally and Nora sat down at my table. So what did Miss Taylor say to you? JT asked. I shook my head. She said Liz isn't coming back to West Side, reported Nora, peering over the top of her glasses. I was standing by the door and heard her. She said Liz is real sick, but I don't think that's true because Liz was in school last Friday and she was fine. JT thought for a moment. My cousin got the stomach flu last week. That could come on real sudden. Yes, but that only lasts a few days, said Nora. Liz isn't coming back because she's a Negro, said Sally. We all turned to look at her. Sally flipped her hair to make sure we were all paying attention. That's what my mother told the principal. They were talking outside the teacher's lounge. That's ridiculous, I said, but not out loud. What? JT sounded confused. My mother and I saw Liz last night. Sally leaned forward and lowered her voice. Way down by 9th Street. That was the colored part of town. What were you doing there? Asked Nora. Our maid, Sue Ann, was sick. We had just dropped her off at her house when I saw Liz come out of the Baptist church on South Chester. She was holding hands with a colored boy. You're kidding, breathed Nora. Sally shook her head. I was so surprised, I called out her name, and I think she heard me because she looked right at me. Then my mother saw her and recognized her from the football game. Mother was so surprised, she almost ran into a lamppost. She wouldn't say one word about it all the way home, but first thing this morning, she came to talk to Principal Watkins. But then, Sally continued, when we got here this morning, the principal said Liz had already withdrawn from school. She didn't even come by to pick up her records. When he heard our story, he said it all made sense. She must have been colored. JT shook his head. Last week, I even loaned her my hairbrush, whispered Sally. Ew! Squealed Nora. I know, Sally said. Of course, I already threw it away. Can you believe it? JT said. A nigger at our school? I stood up, suddenly furious, but I wasn't sure at whom. JT? Miss Taylor? Sally? Liz? Myself? Where are you going? Asked JT. My thumb was throbbing. I shook my head and ran out of the room. In the bathroom, I thought I was going to cry, but I didn't. I just stood in front of the sink and took the bandage off my thumb. I was careful not to glance in the mirror to see my brown hair and brown eyes that looked so much like Liz's. Could it be true? Can a girl be white one day and colored the next? It seemed much more likely that she was sick. Or maybe she was moving. But if she were moving, why wouldn't she have told me? She said she believed in me. But how could she believe in me if she wasn't there? The bell rang and I splashed water on my face. I glanced in the mirror. My skin was the same beige color it had been before. Liz was the person outside of my family I could really talk to. I couldn't lose her. It must be some big misunderstanding. When it was resolved, when she came back, I wanted the magic square book. I wanted to have earned it. History was right after lunch. Miss Taylor looked surprised when I raised my hand. Yes, Marley? I want to do the presentation. My voice shook, but the words were clear. Miss Taylor was speechless. She just nodded and gestured for me to come to the front of the room. Everyone was silent. Every eye was on me. It took forever. Finally, I reached the front of the room. I pulled the black feather from my pocket and stuck it in one of my braids, like an Indian headdress. I took a deep breath. Nothing came out. I counted. 29, 31, 37, 41. Still no voice. Finally, in desperation, I imagined all of them in their underwear. It made things worse. In a moment, I was going to faint dead away. JT was grinning at me like a monkey. A monkey. Sally was stroking her hair, preening like a peacock. Nora's long neck turned her into a giraffe. A boy in the back row had his head down, sleeping like a lion. They were all animals. It was a zoo. I started to talk. The Quapaw Indians were one of the tribes that lived near the river when the first French explorers came to Little Rock. The Quapaw had respect for all living things. After hunting, they would thank the animal they'd killed for giving them food. I stood in front of the class and told them how the Quapaw smoked the peace pipe with the Europeans. I explained how unmarried women wore their hair braided and pinned up, while unmarried women wore their hair braided and pinned up, while married women wore their hair down. "Who did you marry, Sally?" JT called out, and everyone laughed. Sally turned bright red and stopped fiddling with her hair. Miss Taylor shushed them, and I went on, explaining what crops the Quapaw planted, corn, beans, and squash, and where they slept, on woven mats. Finally, I got to the last part of our presentation, the peach seed ceremony. Fathers were real important to the Quapaw, so if yours died, you had to get another one. Instead of letting the grown-ups decide, they let the kids choose. I held up the peach pit I had been clutching in my hand. It left a mark on my palm. If your father died, they gave you a peach pit and put you in a circle of all the men. The man you gave the pit to would be your new daddy. I held up the pit and all the boys started oohing and aahing. "Pick me!" yelled JT. That had been my plan. It was going to be fun, flirty. But he called Liz that name, and now I was determined to pick someone else. Anyone else. I scanned the room. Little Jimmy was quiet and shy and bad at football and, well, little. I'm not sure he'd ever spoken to me before. I'd never spoken to him. But when I placed the pit in his hands, he looked up at me with shining eyes, as if I'd given him a diamond.